This is a photo of my grandpa and me that was taken in 1970, and I called him Nono, which is the Italian word for grandpa. And as being the grandson of the guy who started Radio Flyer, you might think I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. You'd be close. It was actually a silver wagon handle. And growing up, my dad was a very humble, private guy. He didn't talk about the business a lot when I was a kid, so I wasn't really aware of what my grandfather had created. And when I was in 6th grade, we had the assignment to do something about an interesting part of Chicago's history. And so my mom said, well, why don't you do it on what Nono did when he came to this country? And I was like, well, what did he do? And I did this report, and I got an A+ in 6th grade, and I got all this great feedback from my teacher, and I really started to become aware of my grandfather's story and what Radio Flyer means to people. And this is what I learned.
He helped you roam the Wild West. He launched you deep into outer space. He took you on adventures around the world when you were not even old enough to cross the street. His name is Antonio Pasin, the father of the Little Red Wagon. And this is the story of how a child's dream takes flight. Venice, Italy, 1898. Antonio was born into a family of cabinet makers. He learns the craft from his father and grandfather. But as he grows up, he dreams of having his own business. He dreams of America. And at the tender age of 16, Antonio begins a new life in a new world.
He got off of the boat, he had no money, no friend, nobody. He came to this country, nobody gave a job because he was too young. He couldn't even make enough to eat. So he had to do all the hard job longer to get along.
Antonio journeys to Chicago with nothing but his name and a dream. He tries his hand at piano finishing, building cabinets for phonograph players and other odd jobs, but he longs for something more. Antonio invests his hard-earned savings in some used woodworking equipment. He rents a one-room workshop, and there, in 1917, Antonio crafts his first wagon. Still awe-inspired from seeing the Statue of Liberty, he names it the Liberty Coaster. A couple of years after its start, Antonio's business outgrows the one-room shop. He makes the first of many daring business decisions. With more nerves and capital, he opens a larger factory further west in Chicago. The gamble pays off. Antonio receives an order for 7,000 wagons. Suddenly, business is booming. 1927. Never having a wagon as a child, Antonio dreams of creating one that's affordable for every boy and for every girl. He turns his dream into reality and meets the challenge with creativity and steel. He adopts the metal stamping and mass production techniques pioneered by the auto industry. This innovation earns him the nickname Little Ford. Antonio names the first steel wagon the Radio Flyer, after his fascination with the invention of the radio and the wonders of flight. In 1930, he renames his business the Radio, Steel, and Manufacturing Company. Antonio's company is now the world's largest producer of coaster wagons. Even during the Great Depression, his factory produces no less than 1,500 wagons a day. The year is 1933. The World's Fair, a century of progress, is headed for Chicago, and Antonio envisions his boldest dream of all. Company executives consider his idea crazy. Against their advice, and in the midst of the Depression, Antonio takes on major debt. He risks everything he has to fund the construction of an exhibit, a 45-foot statue of a boy riding a giant red wagon. Underneath is a shop that manufactures and sells miniature souvenir wagons for 25 cents. It's a simple yet brilliant promotional idea. The Coaster Boy exhibit captures the attention of visitors the world over. His decision to ignore naysayers is perhaps the defining moment of a career filled with both risk and success. An American icon is born. thank you to the millions of children whose dreams have taken flight with Radio Flyer.
So I learned we have this wonderful origin story and that so many people have these wonderful stories about their Radio Flyer wagons. And I'm going to fast forward to 1992 when I joined the company's sales department at the age of 23, green, clueless, and eating too many office donuts. We wore ties then too. And I knew we had all this great stuff about our brand, but I soon learned that the company was at kind of a crossroads and we had some problems. I'm just going to tell you about 5 of those problems today. So problem number 1, you have no cash. My first week on the job, my dad said, "Hey Robert, come here, I want you to meet this guy. His name is Jerry. He's from the bank and he's here to help." And he said he's a bank-appointed consultant. Well, at the age of 23, I didn't know what a bank-appointed consultant was, but I soon learned you don't want one. The reason we had a bank-appointed consultant was because this was our financial situation. So our sales were about 20 million. We weren't making money, and we had a lot of debt. This is my most complex financial slide for you non-financial people out there, so don't worry. How had this happened? Well, from the mid-1950s to the mid-1980s, we were the country's largest manufacturer of wheelbarrows. And a lot of people don't know that because all of our wheelbarrows were private label wheelbarrows. So we made the Sears Craftsman wheelbarrows. And we hadn't established our own brand. We had very little intellectual property on this product. So in the late 80s, our retail customers started importing these wheelbarrows directly from Taiwan. My dad and his team cut the price to hang in there to cover the overhead in the factory, which resulted in these mounting losses that I described to you. This is a picture of our offices at the time. They were pretty dreary. Walking into the building, you weren't sure, are these guys going to be in business for much longer? And that brings me to problem number 2. Oh shit, plastic wagons. Within 6 months of my start date, competitors introduced plastic wagons, and we did not see this coming at all. We were an inwardly focused manufacturer. We weren't talking to consumers. We didn't consider ourselves a brand company, and that had worked great for 70 plus years, but times had changed. And the problem was that this town and country wagon was half of our sales, and those plastic wagons killed the town and country wagon. That was our cash cow. So we had to figure out, what are we going to do? And it was very clear we needed to get into plastic wagons, but we didn't know anything about this business. We didn't have a product development team. We had 2 engineers who had been with the company for a really long time. They knew everything about how to make things out of steel. We had never sourced a product on the outside of the company, so we had this really steep learning curve. So we started getting into it, and we made a lot of mistakes. First one was the wrong size, then the wrong color. We were trying to be like the competition. Then when we made a plastic version of that wooden town and country, that started selling a little bit better. And on our 4th try, we did a better version of the competition. We were able to sell this into Walmart. But actually, it took 5 tries to really get the winning product, the Pathfinder, the best-selling wagon ever. And it had this really innovative feature that you can see where the seats flip up and flip down. Very simple, but it was a patented feature that enabled it to be kind of 2 wagons in one, with kids sitting in it, and then a flatbed wagon. We added seat belts for the first time in a wagon and cup holders. So this was a big success. Problem number 4, we have a hot item, yay! Well, sometimes, as we all know, some of your biggest failures can be born from a success. And I mentioned I was on the sales team when I first started, so I was taking all these random calls, and one day I got a call from a large food company that said, "Hey, do you guys have a wagon, about this big? We want to buy 1 million of them for a promotion." I was like, "Yes, we have it." I hung up the phone, and then we started figuring out how to make this little wagon. We didn't have one. And that deal fell through, but we created this little toy wagon, which is a really simple idea, but we had never actually made kind of a toy version of this wagon. And even though we didn't sell it to the food company, we started selling this thing like crazy. We sold it to Walgreens. They bought hundreds of thousands of these things. And in 1 year, we sold 1 million of this wagon. And so we were intoxicated by this hot item. Of those of you who have had a hot item, it's really intoxicating. And you're like, how can we follow this up? What else can we do with it? And we saw that people were putting dolls and stuffed animals in the wagon. So we said, well, we should do our own doll. We can be like a big toy company. We can get products into another aisle in the toy store. We can do a commercial. But what kind of doll? Now, before I go any further, I want to say that if you've never fallen in love with a product idea that went on to spectacular failure, it's a lot like being in a bad relationship. Because your friends are telling you, she's no good for you. You need to break up with her. Can't you see that? And you're like, no, I'm in love. It's going to work out. I know this is the right thing. Well, the idea I fell in love with was Angel Love Wagon Babies. Do you remember this hit doll from the late 1990s? No, you don't, because it was a complete failure. And we created this whole story about these angels make this baby just for you and send it to Earth. So we were like kind of borrowing from Cabbage Patch and borrowing from these other ideas. And it broke our heart. Angel Love Wagon Babies broke our heart. And we learned a lot. This was a huge learning experience for me about what we are good at, what our brand means to people. And we are really good at things with wheels, big things with wheels for kids. And it was a huge learning experience. Problem number 4, we're losing money on every wagon. That's kind of a problem when you're in the wagon business. This is a picture from one of our catalogs post-World War II, and at that time, we were selling the fact that we had this capacity to meet this pent-up consumer demand after the war. And the fact was that our factory could make 2 million wagons a year. But by the year 2000, we were making about 500,000 wagons a year, and a lot of those we were selling at really slim to no margins. We found ourselves in kind of the same situation we had been in the wheelbarrow business. And it was really forcing us to ask some of those tough questions. What can we be the best in the world at? What does our brand mean to people? Should we continue to be a manufacturer? And while it became very clear that we needed to really focus on building the brand and design and product development and then partnering with manufacturers wherever it makes sense to make the product, because our product line was starting to expand into other manufacturing processes that we didn't know anything about, like the plastic wagons, that it was time to shut down the factory in Chicago. So in 2004, we decided to do that. It was emotionally a very tough decision because we'd been a manufacturer from day one, and this was going to result in people losing their jobs. And it was a really tough period of time, but I think one of the best things about it was that when the news broke that we were shutting down the factory, news crews came to our parking lot to try to get quotes from people who had just lost their jobs, to get those kind of nasty sound bites for the evening news. And not one person said anything negative about our company or our family. And I think that was really because of the reservoir of trust that had been built up over so many years. People were really sad about this, but they knew it was coming, and they knew it was pretty much inevitable because of how we had communicated with everyone. So at the same time we were figuring that out, we were expanding into other products that actually sold, unlike the doll. And the story on this product was that I mentioned we weren't doing a lot of consumer research when the plastic wagon thing happened. But we started doing a lot of research, and one of the things we would always ask people is, what radio flyer product did you have as a kid? And of course, they would tell the stories about their little red wagon, but often they'd say, I had a radio flyer tricycle. We thought, wow, that's crazy because we didn't make tricycles. and so then we'd say, well, describe the tricycle you had as a kid. And they would describe this product. They say it had a chrome fender, it had streamers, it had this big bell on it. And we're like, wow, we should make a tricycle. Pretty smart, huh? And so we figured if we could give those design cues, because our brand had been around for so long, they couldn't remember the brand of the tricycle they had as a kid, but if we gave them those design cues, put the Radio Flyer brand on it, they would point to it and say, that's the tricycle I had as a kid, and that's what happened. And then we expanded that with kind of some other retro-style products, and we started to learn what we're good at, what our brand means to people, and started fueling our growth that way. But we weren't out of the woods yet. The last problem is you can't be a great company, you're just a small family business. This was kind of the prevailing mentality at the company when I started. As I told you, the financial situation was pretty tough, so we didn't have a lot of money to invest in people and products, and so I'd get pushback like this, like, well, you can't come out with a ton of products, we don't have the money to do it. But I just had the attitude of, well, let's come out with one product that we make a little more money on and use that money to invest back in the business. Just let's grow it that way. And so we started hiring people. And the first people we really focused on hiring were designers and engineers to build a really robust, creative product development team that would fuel our growth. And to create a fun culture. People always ask me, wow, Radio Flyer seems like a fun place. When I started, it actually wasn't that fun, but we hired creative, talented people who are making it and have made it really fun. And we articulated our mission and our values, which we had never done before. And our mission is to bring smiles to kids of all ages and create warm memories that last a lifetime. And this really came from a company-wide dialogue that we had over the course of a year. And people would say, you know, when I tell people I work at Radio Flyer, the first thing they do is smile, and the second thing they do is tell a story. And the story are always these wonderful stories about childhood. So that became our mission, and then we articulate even further the actions that we need to take to deliver that mission. Our values we call the Little Red Rule, which is kind of our spin on the Golden Rule. Every time we touch people's lives, they'll feel great about Radio Flyer. And so we hired the people, we articulated the culture we wanted to build, and we started coming out with a lot of products. And that is what's fueled our growth. As I mentioned, that tricycle, we weren't in tricycles, now we're the #1 tricycle maker. Our sales have grown by more than 5 times since those early days that I described to you. You can even customize a wagon on our website now. You can really, the working title for this project was Pimp Your Wagon, but we didn't think that was very family friendly, so we call it Build a Wagon. And you can do it with a tricycle. This tricycle starts out as a stroller, but as the kid grows up, the parts are moved to leave a tricycle, and scooters. So this has been a really great process of developing direct sales to consumers through our website. And our most recent big product launch was with Tesla. And so many of you have probably had those battery-operated vehicles for your kids or grandkids. When we entered this category, we wanted to do something really different and do a lot of firsts. And so we decided we wanted to have lithium-ion batteries so that it was faster to charge and held the charge longer, and that we wanted to offer a custom experience where you can go and design your car, you can pick the color of your car, and we partnered with Tesla. And when we launched it last year, Elon Musk tweeted about it, and then we had an incredible firestorm of media that was phenomenal, that we've never had before, with over 1 billion impressions for this product launch. And I think it's because it captured the imagination of people, and the product just looks so great. So I showed you those jewelry offices. These are our offices today. So we took the building we've been in since the 30s, the original factory, and we did a LEED Platinum renovation of the building where we can really bring our brand to life and create an inspiring workplace for our team. This is our play lab, so we have an on-site play lab and test track where we test out our products. And all of this has resulted in getting a lot of recognition of being a great place to work, and it's really part of the cultural reinvention of the company. So a couple of years ago, we were rated by Fortune the #1 best place to work for small companies. Google was #1 for the big companies. We were #1 for the small companies. And we've gotten a lot of other recognition for that, which has been really, really great and very, very gratifying for the team. One of our recent developments and kind of where we're headed as a company is, I mentioned the stories and love and smiles and all that great stuff that's around Radio Flyer. Now we want to translate all of that into entertainment that can keep the brand even more relevant to kids. So we created an animated short that we won an Emmy for, and I'm just going to show you just a little part of it right now.
You know, that wagon used to be your dad's. I guess your dad didn't tell you about the aliens.
And then adventure ensues on the short. So you can check out the full short if you want. So we're celebrating our 100th anniversary this year, and when we kicked off our celebration at the beginning of the year, we all toasted to the next 100 years. So we really are, we're celebrating the first 100 years, but we're really looking toward the future. And one of the things we're really passionate about is creating awesome kids products that inspire active play. That's one of the key parts of our mission. And that's something that we're really fired up about, and we feel like we can do that a lot more, and that really anything that kids can play with outside is fair game for Radio Flyer in the future. And I always conclude, I do a version of this talk with new employees, and I always conclude with this quote: "We drink from wells we did not dig." because it's so true, I think, in life, and I like to remind especially new people coming into the company, like think about all the people that have helped you get where you are today. I mean, we're all drinking from wells we did not dig, but especially at a company like Radio Flyer. I mean, I am so grateful that I was lucky enough to be born into the family that started Radio Flyer. I didn't earn that. And the brand was created by many people that came before me. And one of the things that gets me so fired up and that I fell in love with at such an early age is my grandfather's story and what the Radio Flyer brand means to people. And with that, I feel a sense of responsibility in the most positive way to build Radio Flyer into something that's even greater than it's ever been. Thank you.